All right, mates, welcome back. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. Hope everybody is doing well and ready for a great April, May. Moving into pre-spawn, out of pre-spawn on the Tidal Potomac. This is part of the Tidal Potomac breakdown series. Hope everybody has enjoyed this series so far. Gotten a lot of positive feedback from a lot of people. And I've also gotten some other things more like baits, to include some baits in the mix and to talk more about that and maybe some setups and all that kind of stuff that I've seen kind of work. So I'm going to add some of the baits into this one today. We're on satellite view. I think a lot of feedback I've gotten is people like the satellite view better than the map view, which would be this view right here, obviously. Okay, but either one. If you want this link for this, shoot me a message, JL Scott Fishing and Eats on Facebook, or just post in the comment section, and I'll get with you on getting this situated for you. This is actually better than Google and better than all that. So we're going to start here at Leesylvania in the next breakdown. Okay, we started above it. We were above here. Belmont Bay. We talked about Belmont Bay in the last one. And we're going to start with Leesylvania, but we also have the nip. What I call the nip. It's called the Nibasi, the Indian name. And the spelling was moved back to that spelling. It was Niops. So you will find that most of the creeks and most of the areas of the Potomac River have an Algonquin language feel to them. On the Nibby, that would be water in Algonquin. And so a lot of what you're seeing in April is known as the pink moon. We call it the pink moon or the moss. From the moss, pink colors, flowers. Historically, it's called a pink moon. If you're into the whole lunar stuff, otherwise known as the fish moon. There's a reason for that. It's because the fishery is known historically going all the way back to the Algonquin. When the early settlers arrived, this was the month in which the river began to wake up. We use terms like pre-spawn. We use terms like that for fishing. But in reality, you want to take in the whole ecosystem and the whole habitat and the whole river is what's happening. Because a lot of these things are related to your ability to catch fish. For example, when the birds return to Mattawoman on the Maryland side, that's a pretty damn good indication that the bass have already moved up shallow. Right? I mean, that's nature telling you, because they're locating food. They wouldn't be in there if there weren't food, when there wasn't a food source in there. And they come in there every year, right? And so you think about these things and you want to look at history. Now, if you're from the Northeast, New York, all the way up into Canada, it's the breaking ice moon. Why is April the breaking ice moon? Because a lot of the lakes up there were frozen over, right, during the wintertime. And so they begin to really melt, and then by April, all the ice is gone, right, historically. And so that's really where we see it. So right now, we are in what's called the Seguin, okay? Seguin, all right? That's Algonquin for early spring. So if you go back and you read all the history of the Potomac River, even with the influx of us and man and development and civilization, if you want to call it that, and look at all this, housing developments, okay, and all this, not that much has changed, mates. If you go back and read a lot of that history of where fish were and the abundance of fish, and the fish haven't really changed all that much compared to all the way back to Jamestown, for like the James River and out there, right, in Yorktown, places like that, the Potomac, from the early settlers arriving. The fish movements and patterns of behavior have not really changed all that much. We've changed, of course. But nature doesn't really seem to, sometimes it just gives us a nice little wink and a nod. So April's a fish moon, pre-spawn to spawn, depending on what we talked about before in the Potomac. You've got 62 to 64, 5, somewhere in there, right? Not over 5. I don't think 65 yet. Above Woodrow Wilson Bridge. Okay? So we covered that. Smoots Bay, Spoils, Blue Plain, all the way up. You're in the mid, like the lower 60s. Okay. Down here, as you work your way down the Virginia side, you're not there yet. You're in the 50s, the mid 50s. Why? You don't really have that warm water runoff. Okay, and that warm water runoff can create a lot of bites. That's why a lot of mates run up to DC all the time. Okay, they'll go out of Smallwood or Leesylvania, head up to DC, especially if they're MLF or bass, and make that run to get some of that warm water. Spawning already happening up there in some specific areas because they've already been triggered, right, by the water temperature and the great weather. We've been in the 80s, been in the 70s and 80s for the last week or two. Okay. And so a lot of people will come right out of here, right out of Leesylvania, which is the state park in Virginia. Also has a kayak and canoe launch down here, entering into Powell's Creek, otherwise known as Yosakomoko. Okay, that's what the Algonquin called that creek. Okay, before Powell took over, like that became the prominent name. The English settlers and all of that stuff, but the Algonquin had a different name for that creek. And it is a really, really awesome place to get on some fish, mates, throughout the spring to early summer. It really, really is. If you go back, I would imagine if you go back and look at some of the old tournaments that are probably on YouTube, you'll know this. You'll know these two creeks. You'll know the Nip and Powell's by the commuter rail, like Amtrak, the railroad crossings, okay? And you'll be able to see them in the background of the anglers, so you'll know which creek they're in once you know what those bridges look like, to get an idea of what I'm talking about, okay? Now, to the north of Leesylvania, as opposed to Powell's Creek, you've got a lot of docks. You've got a lot of what we call city structure, okay? What's the difference between city structure and natural structure? Well, natural structure is going to be your laydowns, your fallen timber, all of those natural things that you're going to find in your river system, no matter where you live, okay? Trees fall down, flood, bring stuff down, rock, all that stuff is natural structure that bass are going to relate to, align to, all of that good stuff, okay? City structure is that mess, okay? Right there. All that marina, okay? All up in there, okay? City structure, a bridge built by man. It's not natural, okay? Bridge pylons, okay? Pilings, okay? Right? Bass are going to relate to them, especially this time of year in the pre-spawn, okay? When you undoubtedly are going to experience staging, okay? Transitioning from one area to another, right? And usually they're going to be locked up. If you got live scope out there on the Potomac River right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? A lot of them together. I wouldn't call them schools because we don't really whereas we look at the bait fish like that, but a lot of bass together trying to figure out, right? Who's dating who? Who's going to mate with who? All that good mess, right? Before what happens? Okay. Bed's got to get made, right? Okay. Boom. So they got that first date out in the channel. Okay. They're moving up. Going to make the beds. And she's going to follow in, right? So there's kind of two stages to that spawn during pre-spawn. Okay. There's pre-spawn, then there's pre-spawn. And usually when people talk about pre-spawn, for me, when I think of pre-spawn, I think of the separation. Okay, I think of like you've got one bass out making beds in shallows and you've got another bass hanging out in deeper water somewhere close by. Okay, and that's the number one mistake that a lot of people make over and over again is they just go shallow. Maybe they catch them, maybe they don't. And they don't think who's coming in behind and where are they? And to then go out immediately, move back off, go back through again. Or if you're coming in with a kayak, just saw this over the weekend, and helped a mate out because he didn't have electronics. So he was about 20 yards, 15 to 20 yards from the contour line. And what do we mean by that? When we have electronics and we see the contour lines during the pre-spawn, we want to hit those areas at 12 feet, 8 to 12, but I like 10 to 12 foot contour lines where it then drops to like 3 feet. Okay? Go shallow. Start there and work in. Too many guys just run the bank and burn the bank. Okay? And and that's not, I'm not to say that you're not going to catch any fish in the pre-spawn or that way, okay? I mean, burning a whopper plopper, a chatterbait, that's what he was throwing, a chatterbait. And it was like, but, talking to him, we were like, hey, two things. One, he was 15 to 20 yards closer to the bank than he should have been. And two, he his kayak positioning wasn't really suited for what we saw was happening in the river. Okay, his boat positioning. Okay, so again, tidal fishery, ingoing and outgoing tide. How do you want to be throwing that chatterbait? How do you want to be throwing your whopper, your moving bait, when you've got the considerations of what's happening in the fishery in terms of the tide, right? So do you want to be with it, against it? You don't really want to be thrown against the tide, right? And so your boat positioning matters, right? So, but a lot of people, again, this is what I say: read, cast, catch. Learn to read your river. Learn to read the tides. Learn to read your river. Learn to read your water flow. Current seams, upper Potomac, current seams, okay? All about current seams and water flow, okay? Tidal Potomac, the tides, okay? And where the fish are going to relate to during different parts of the tide, okay? Now, a lot of that depends on the day, because these tides are different, right? Depending on your time of the month that you're going to be fishing at. And so it's integral to, we had that conversation. Long story short, we put him about 15 or so yards back out, changed him up to a crankbait, and he caught two. By the time we were in that section, he had caught two fish inside of 15 minutes. Okay? Because that's where they are. All right? And so, again, city structure, all the marinas up in here that you can see. And if you look at this, you can see what I'm talking about. It's a lot. Okay? It's a lot. I mean, as far as, it's probably the first real big one south of Belmont Bay, okay? But you've got the railroad here and the railroad crossing here, which is can be absolute fire. And then on this side of the bank, on this side, you're going to have a lot of rocky, shallow rock, okay? Which is great to be running, a small little square bill crankbait right through that rock. Bounce it right off through that rock. One of the things you want to do, okay, right now in the pre-spawn, is forget the red nonsense, okay, at the moment, okay, early April, the moment, because the crawl are not prolific, okay. You can certainly entice some baits, throwing your red lipless. I prefer with the chartreuse on the bottom, just because it add a little effect. That green, remember, the bass are seeing red and they're seeing green. Those are the colors that they are actually seeing, okay. So you want something with a lot of noise. Spring is waking up. Things are waking up. There's a lot more noise in the river column. Okay, and I don't mean just like current flow. And smallie chasers understand what I'm talking about that kind of smallmouth bass understand the difference between current noise, okay, water running through rock, and other noises. Okay, so do largemouth bass. I think to a lesser extent. They're not as much noise. To me, they're not as much noise. Largemouth, and I'm sure I could be wrong, but it's just me. My gut is they're not as much to noise, I think, largemouth, as much as they are vibration, across their lateral line. Just they can, and even in stained, dirty water, they'll find that damn thing. Part of that, I think, is more vibration in the water than necessarily noise. Because otherwise, how can you explain getting absolutely crushed on silent lipless crankbaits? right? With no rattle, no thump. And they just crush it sometimes when everybody else is throwing really loud baits early summer, and you roll through there with a silent, silent crank or a silent lipless, and you crush them and they don't. So I think largemouth are a lot more about vibration. Just my opinion. Could be wrong. So all up in this section up in here, they will come in here. Oh, you're always good for 1 or 2 fish on these pilings, babe. Okay, on these pilings. I'm just telling you. Amtrak, God bless you. So you're looking at there in and down in pals because the line goes through both creeks. Okay, bridges to bridges. As it goes through the point of Leesylvania, where the Leesylvania Park and all that is. So, but up through here, it gets shallow and it becomes a really great spot as they're moving in and they want to move back, and those that are moving back into that creek during the springtime. Okay. Okay. So again, Leesylvania State Park right here. You've got your boat launch here, predominant boat launch on the Virginia side, just like Smallwood would be on Mattawoman on the Maryland side, and then some other ramps all up north on the Maryland side. Okay, Powell's Creek. Canoe launch, awesome day if you got time to get out. Launch right here, car top, canoe launch here, and boom, you can just spend the day in Powell Creek, okay? And fish to your heart's content, and you'll have a good day. Again, it's different staging up, but the bass are already, grass is starting to come in Powell's Creek. It is already starting to catch quite a bit of fish. Longer here, opportunities off of pilings. The bridge is longer through the mouth of this creek. So you've got that opportunity for pals. You also have, what I've noticed anyway, not as many as before over the years, but you also got, I think because this is more marshy and kind of like it's grassy, paddy, all that in the back, you also get a lot more beaver kind of like exposure here because of that creek running in than you would the nip above it. Just my experience. So that is Powell. That is the Leesylvania area. Okay, let's go a little bit lower down here, and you're going to find we're going to work our way down. Okay, now one thing you're going to notice here, mates, is there is not a lot of docks, okay, on the Virginia side in this section. There's a lot, kind of more to the north, but doesn't mean that there's not great areas to fish, okay? And a lot of times it gets sleeped on until you get down to the point, right? And so interesting. I was going to talk about that bait real quick, but so you've got below piles, you've got cockpit and then possum, right? I don't know if they're listed. Possum Nose, not Possum Point. Possum Point is further down near Quantico Creek, okay? Look how long that friggin' right out there, right? Like, okay, there's just possum nose. Okay, so some of them are sometimes they're on the map, sometimes they're not. Depends on what you're looking at. But you can see there's not a lot. It's like pretty much a run, right? So keep that in mind, okay? That it's a long run, again, for boaters to different stretches, okay? And for kayakers, most of them are staying in the creeks, all right? Now, here out in these areas, okay, there's no reason to sleep on in the pre-spawn to the pre-spawn. No reason to sleep on these areas, okay? Because a lot of times bass is great jerkbait fishing. A lot of times swim baits, trust me, swim baits. A lot of times they're suspended in 12 to 17 feet of water. Haven't made their move up. They're kind of like, doing that thing before they're going to move on up. And so you can find that in different areas. All right. So again, we're off that point, and Possum Nose is another point, kind of, turn, I should say. We're going to make our way down to the next Virginia Creek, okay? which is very, very popular, of course. That would be Possum Point. That's Dominion Power, all of that good stuff, all in and around here. To, again, Quantico Creek. Most people know Quantico is known for. Quantico is known for marine base Quantico. All right. So, let me lower that a little bit. Get a look at this area. All right. Now, understand that Quantico Creek and Quantico, the area, has its own set of regulations and requirements. Okay, I will put the link in the description, or you can find it, and I post this video on my Facebook page, JL Scott Fishing and Eats. iSportsman, you want to check in and check out on iSportsman, okay, for Quantico. You also want to check in if you plan on, if your event allows, if you're a kayak angler and maybe you're coming to KBF. I haven't seen the ramp listings yet. If Hospital Point Boat Ramp is on the listings and you want to utilize that ramp, understand you're going to have to check in, make arrangements, check in, okay, when you enter Marine Corps Base Quantico, okay, and you need a license, okay, independent of your Virginia bass, Tidal bass, or Maryland fishing license. You need that permit to be able to fish. Quantico's got a ton of ponds and waters and all of that mess. Independent of Quantico Creek, okay? But so if you're going to launch there, you're going to need to check in. You're going to need to get a permit. So you could have parking is kind of, you can't park in the hospital boat like area. There's the ramp parking, and there's a little bit of an area adjacent to it to the side that you're allowed to park in, but you don't want to park anywhere all up in here in any of that mess, okay? Because you will get ticketed, all right? And so just keep that in mind. Go ahead and Google iSportsman or Fishing Marine Corps Base Quantico, and that information will come up. And there are a couple of restrictions, obviously, you want to pay attention to, but most of the time is they prefer and want people to check in and check out when you're on the base. You know, you have your cars on the base, you're on the base, and you're going out fishing, okay? But again, just Hospital Point Boat Ramp right there, Marine Corps Base, Quantico, in the town of Quantico. And so you've got Quantico Creek, okay? Another really great little creek from Point Side to all the way back, okay? Trying to remember, I think it was Clifton Point. It's another point. I think it's that point. Might be that one. So you've got a couple points, more or less, that you can play with in here as well to continue that line. You've also got some rock, and you've got grass, and you've got all that stuff that goes kind of way back. Now, coming out of Quantico, if you have any other questions about Quantico, the marine side, just give me a heads up. It's not. It sounds a lot more complicated than it is. It's not that complicated. It's just a couple other extra steps in terms of having that proper access, getting in the base, all those good things. Most people don't utilize this stuff, like say on attorney day, because of the cumbersome. You just want to be able to get and launch and go, and so a lot of people sleep on Quantico Creek. And you know, it's probably less pressure, in my opinion, probably than Pals and all the other creeks, Aquia, which we'll get to here in a second, Potomac, further south. Now, again, remember, as we make our way further south here, mates, the water tends to get a little, not drastic, but a degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees colder, okay, compared to further up. Keep that in mind. All right, now we're right down here, namesake right here, right there. Scott's Island. That's right, Scott's Island, okay? What do we know about Scott's Island, all right? Grew up my whole life, okay, in the Episcopal tradition, Anglican tradition of my family, and knowing the history of our family and Scots in general, in Virginia. And most of the Scots that came to Virginia were Anglican, Episcopalian, obviously from England back in the day. And this island was actually called Scots Island for a time because the Scots owned it. That's right. And so it's kind of really cool, to tell the story. I like to tell the story at the ramp a lot of times about the Rev. So Reverend Alexander Scott was the guy who was the Reverend for, at first was the parish over Wharton Parish, which they don't really call it that anymore. It's now Aquia. But currently today it's Aquia Church. So it's the Aquia Episcopal Church, but it was called, the over Wharton Parish. Obviously we're talking about 1700s, mates. But anyway, what's really interesting about this, the reason why I tell the story anyway about the Scots and this island is I usually play a game with people and I'm like, can you guess what musician or celebrity was going to buy this island? Would probably have bought this island had something not happened to him. Okay? And if you comment in the comment section of this video, which musician, okay, was going to buy this island, all right, I will send you a free giveaway. And I will give you a hint. I will just give you a hint. Strawberry Fields Forever. Okay, there's your hint. So if you're watching this video and you comment in the comment section, the musician, a.k.a. band member, okay, that was going to buy this island to build his home on, I will send you a giveaway outside of the Quantico area. Interesting. Oh, by the way, if you're coming down here, always stay down towards this side of the island. In here, there's a bunch of restrictions in there you don't really want to deal with. Trust me, you don't want to deal with the government. And so you can hit this area. You can fish along this area. But you really can't get all up in this mess. Most of the time, most tournaments, kayak fishing tournaments, for example, always have this creek off limits, mostly because of access. Although I'm not really sure that's still the way it is, to be honest. I'm going to have to check that out. Because, anyway, I'll just check that out. But it is probably off limits. Historically, it's been off limits for like KBF events. Because it didn't have main river access, but I'm not really exactly sure if that's true anymore. But I haven't been down into that section. So we're making our way further down. Clifton Point, all the way down. Trying to see if I want to tell you something else. I'm going to go to, might not show up in here. All right, coming down. Again, one of those other stretches is just like you're making the run, open it, walk in the channel to Brent Point. Then you've got, Thorny Point, Brent Point. We're going into Aquia now. Now, Aquia has the Aquia Landing, the 32-acre park. That will be the headquarters for KBF if you're a kayak angler for the tournament at the end of April coming up in a few weeks. It's about 27 miles deep. Look at this, guys. Tons of points, tons of areas. Okay, yes, you also deal with snakeheads a lot in this particular creek. Docks, okay, lots of docks, okay, lots of residential community around Aquia, okay. Hope Springs Marina, 27 miles all the way back up in here, okay, to get back up in here, right? So that's a haul. You've got some launching areas. You've got some kayak areas where you can launch from in Aquia Creek. Some of them are kind of a haul in terms of unloading and loading up. But this creek, this is Stafford County. This creek goes all the way to Fauquier County, which is west of Loudoun County in Northern Virginia. That tells you that's the actual feeder creek, okay, not the when we say 27 miles. Look at this thing. Gets all the way back up in here. And people will go all the way back up there and fish that grass when that grass gets in. Okay. And so just think about that. You've got Hope Springs. That'll probably be a launch that you'll be able to utilize, as well as Aquia in there a lot of times. It really all depends. You need to check on what your tournament specifications are. It's a really weird like dynamic, what's public and what's private, because a lot of the private marinas allow you to launch with a fee. So it's almost like they're public. To me, anyone can pay the $10 and launch. So I don't know, but always check the lists out. Now they're supposed to have modified lists of only approved launches this year for a lot of kayak fishing trails. Local trails could be different for sure. Again, really popular on the Virginia side fishing destination. There's your Aquia Landing Park. Okay. And then again, this is a difference where you've got a little bit more dock. Okay, a lot more little dock. Sometimes people will pull up and hit on than say further up north. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to get into an area I've always loved to fish growing up because it's got a mix of everything. Okay, and so Marlboro Point. I don't know if it's going to show the point, but you can get the idea here. You got them on both sides. So you've got the marina on this side, docks, okay, the point area, docks, okay. Cannot stress that enough. You've got its own creek up in here, okay. Trying to remember what that 15. I think that's about 12 miles. I think it's like 12 miles. 12 miles back. Could be more. But it's just a really great take your kayak out and go fishing. Back sometimes depends. Again, there's some of these. Now remember, mates, it's a tidal fishery. So a lot of these areas you don't want to be up and back there during low tide. Okay, you can be careful with that. All right, you can get stuck in some of these areas low tide, and on the Maryland side, low tide. If you don't watch, But anyway, it's just a really great little place to go into. I like Potomac. I've always liked Potomac Creek a lot. It's kind of dropped off a little bit in terms of popularity. I think PALs and Aquia and some of the parts up north and major tournaments, because a lot of major tournament anglers have won in those creeks, and it gets publicized, draws more boat traffic, draws more fishermen to those particular areas. But it's got a ton. Like I said, look at these points. It's got tons of areas in here. Okay, different situations. It transitions to a lot like Mattawoman, back towards the back. It's got areas, it's got points, it's got secondary ones, it's got a little bit of everything that you can play with, and it has the grass, and it has those things. It has, a little bit of deeper water than I think PALs. In a few areas, you have to look at your contour lines, but that's really what you want to look at. Okay. And what I mean by that is just like we gave that example when I gave that example earlier about helping a mate out. Like, especially a lot of guys on kayaks don't have graphs, right? Some do now. I mean, it's become a lot more popular. But to find those lines at this point is to find those areas, a little bit of deeper water, and then shallow water nearby. Okay. And this is where you're going to find them, and you can run those crankbaits. And what I was talking about before is, change things up, okay? You can go with a larger size crank, okay? Always spring, pre-spawn. I want a knocker. This is a knocker and a rattle, okay, in the larger format. It's like an S crank, okay? Again, shad, herring, active right now, okay? Perch, not as much. So what I also always like to take with me whenever I go to the Potomac is I always want to take at least a perch style crankbait, okay? Because if the perch are running and the run's kind of, but I mean, they're still out, okay? They're going to get fed on, all right? Just like river herring, just like shad, Okay, the shad are still running. Shad are still pushing up in the Occoquan. Shad are still doing what they're doing, okay? And so, but there's a larger size crankbait, but then you also have the smaller, okay? And here's the sound difference. So this is your large, thump and rattle, and then this is your one knocker, okay? Smaller, Tidal wobble, okay? Knocker crankbait. And that blue, if we could see that as effectively, but that blue compared to, okay, this one has a little bit more yellow and red kind of coloration to it that matches the changes. Remember, shad that are moving, shad will stay closely aligned to the bottom during the wintertime, okay? And so they get that, they can get that red, kind of red tint to them, okay? And they'll come off over time when they make the run, especially those that return. Some never return. But just keep that in mind in terms of your coloration patterns for that. Okay. Now, as you get later on in April, and we get the break, it's a crawl break, right? We're gonna get that crawl break. If we get that crawl break, that's when you're gonna wanna same, and they haven't spawned really, because we're not really into like that great May, okay? Again, in those ditches, okay, when you first start to see crawl, that's where you want to begin to throw more of a diver, okay? In any kind of color, this is a darker one, any kind of crawl, kind of pattern coloration that you want to do, because you're in deeper water, 8 feet to 12 feet predominantly. And that's where we found them to the tune of 13 pounds one day, 18 pounds another day. Okay, it wasn't in 3 feet of water. It was in 6, 8 to 12, like that. On when you're looking at that, and all the one thing that had the same similarity, okay, of all the catches, is they all were in that level, but they all were in the next contour was a significant drop of almost half the depth. So if we were in 8 feet of water and caught a bass, the next contour line was like 3.5 feet. Okay? Or if we were in 12 feet of water, the next contour line was like 6.5 feet. Okay? And so that you want to play that, okay, as you work your way up. And when you get in those areas, like I said before, in Pals and or the nip above Leesylvania, or Neb, depending on Neb's, people call it different things. You can run your lipless crankbait over the rock. Okay, you can do a crawl pattern, your bright red pattern that's popular, all through there. Also like to throw in the creeks. Always like to carry it. A bluegill, a frog pattern, bluegill pattern, perch pattern, anything like that. Depending on what the weather we're doing with the skies and with the condition, whatever tide situation we're in. Also the skies, what the kind of day looks like. Or do we having a topwater bite or not? One of the other things that you want to think about a lot is fish different. A lot of people will tell you that black and blue is the color, the go-to color, and it is. Black and blue does phenomenal on the Potomac. But do not sleep on, as we get into April and into May, okay, your off brown, not even green pumpkin, but it's got a lot of like sparkle in it, okay, when this was poured. It's got red flake, blue flake. It's got the blue flake for the black and blue. It's got some red flake in it. It's got some silver flake in it, okay? Trust me, they will freaking crush this, okay? You can also modify this, throw this on a Ned rig if you want to throw it on a Ned rig if it's one of those tough bite days, okay? The other thing you can do with your finesse guy and soft plastic guy is in the same color pattern or thereof with more like yellows. Go to a crawl like color, green pumpkin, orangey, something like this. Okay? April and May. Tube. The smaller version of this is freaking crazy stick on the upper Potomac, but the larger version tends to be more effective in the tidal Potomac when the opportunity presents itself. The other thing that I will say about bait presentations is as you work your way down in the DC section, which is everything, I'll say everything above Leesylvania, even though a lot of that's Virginia, Maryland, not DC. DC kind of starts around the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and we covered in the previous videos. I'll link that up here in the video and in the description. Drop shot is one of the freaking best presentations that you can present to DC bass. But as you work your way down, you can still use it outside of the mouths, outside in the channels, in the deeper water. That drop shot can be highly effective. If you don't see a topwater bite, if you don't see anything happening with moving like spinner baits. Now, for spinner baits, when I'm outside, this doesn't mean they don't work inside the creeks, but when I like to get moving into the creeks, okay? All right, but I still have some depth. It's going to be 17 feet of water, 12 feet of water. Some of these places are going to be upwards of 20 feet, okay? But 17 to 15 to 12 feet of water, working my way in, and I want to throw a spinner bait in the spring, and I'm getting deep into April and into May, and the crawl are effective, and people are like, that's when I'm going to change things up from a white spinner bait, okay, that I would typically always have with me, to something of a little bit of color, okay? This has some orange in it, okay? Something like that. And then if I really want to go bold, I'm going to go with a bright red. I call this Mahokey. Mahokey spinner, okay? It's like Virginia Tech Hokie colors, okay? Shorter shank, okay? Elevated hook, okay? Great for hook sets. In my opinion, and just a really overall great pattern here with reds and a little bit of orange in there, okay? It's just crazy. Can't explain it, but on the Tidal Potomac, it's just a really great spinnerbait. Now, if I am further out fishing like this last weekend and we were in deeper water, looking for holes that we know of, we're familiar with in the fishery, from waypoints and such, and I want to throw more of an open water, depending on what the weather conditions are. Is it rain? Is it slightly cloudy, overcast? Is it bluebell? Like whatever. That's so much of this. Plus with the tide, that's what complicates it. It's like adding all this stuff in. Is I want to do something that I know very similar to this crankbait, okay? Because it's just like herring. It's just like herring, okay? And so it's a no-brainer for the bass, okay, to just freaking swallow this. But if I want to have something, a different flash and a different action to it, this is my go-to Potomac channel. If I'm fishing ditches from the bridge on back in deeper water, if I'm just fishing out in deeper water, I'm not in the creeks, I'm in the channel, I'm closer, to the main river. This is the spinnerbait pattern that you want to look for, okay? You want to get blue herring colors, okay? It's like shad, herring, depending on what's going on in your, at the time. If you come across bait balls, all the better, right? And whatever you're going to throw, whatever's your poison you want to throw in there. If you want to throw in a jerk bait, yes, you could throw the jerk bait in the Potomac in April and May and be highly effective. I just have really, really love these, okay? And it's just one of those things that you probably may have never seen before, to be honest. This kind of pattern. And that's how I like to fish different baits, is understanding my forage, understanding what's happening in the fishery, understanding the tides, understanding the fish behavior, and then tweaking something that is part of what the common knowledge is, but then tweaking it. So like if you're going to Murray or you're going to like Anna or you're going to Hartwell, you're going to a place like that, it's like, oh, blueback herring. Just a little bit twist on it, okay? Something that's going to differentiate. Maybe it's add something as very simple as an underspin. Talked about this in a previous video I put out this week, okay? This thing's lights out. Lights out. I've already gone through 2 packs, okay? I'm just saying it's lights out. Like, it's just a different, you use silver blade, copper blade, gold blade, change it up. just adds a little bit of different flash. And you're just like, why does that work? It's because it's just slightly different. Okay. And when you want to get that 5, and I was just talking to the mates over the weekend, the guy grabbed the 5-pounder was get your 5, like your tournament or, whatever you got going down, get them, and then go to a big spin, go to a hard bait swim bait, 5 inches to 7 inches, and go for that big bite in the channel. Go for that big bite in the mouth of that creek. Go for that kicker fish if you've already got your 5, right? I mean, if you're in a tournament, you're sitting on 15 pounds on the Potomac, 13, 15 pounds, you're probably in the top 20 of your event, okay? Or top 15 if you got like 40, 50 voters. I guarantee you, you're in the top 10. So you go for that kicker fish, right? With a big bait, a big glide bait, a big spinner bait, big swim bait or glide bait. Trust me, they will come up and they will swallow that thing if they're feeding up, because they're getting closer to that move from pre-spawn to pre-spawn to moving into spawn. Okay? She is going to want to feed up before she spawns. Okay? He is going to be annoyed. Okay? So he's working the bed. He's doing what he's doing, right? So your goal is to entice those strikes. How do you entice a strike from a male who's busy at work, right? Annoy him. How do you annoy him? Noise, vibration, right? All those things near him, right? Annoy him at that point before he settles in to where he's not interested, okay? And when that happens, it's predominantly because they've already fed. Like the deal is done, okay? The deed is done, the deal is done, and they're in the area, but they're kind of done. They're like, man, I'm chilling. I mean, and so that's kind of like how it is. So it's like, but in the early pre, when they're separated, annoy him. Because you don't want anything around. Like, you don't want anything around. You don't want anybody watching his business. You don't want anybody in his area. You don't want anyone near his bed, near the bed he's doing, what he's doing, nothing. So then bluegills that are all like in them creeks, them bluegills that are all like moving around, he's eating every single one of them. Because he's just sending a message. Don't come, right? So he's setting the stage for her to come on up for spawn. And so that's it, One other bait I didn't cover, just because I don't feel like I need to cover, because you can just Google chatterbait on YouTube and everybody will tell you, is you obviously can roll with any kind of variation of, April, May chatterbait. Okay, crawl type chatterbait. Anything in this color pattern, mates. Anything in this color pattern. The only other thing I will say, though, is about fish differently, is, like I said before, black and blue plastics, black and blue trailers, black and blue, right? Oh, summertime, hot on the Potomac, right? And so why not think out of the box and go black and blue crankbait, right? If it's color they're keying on, and it is color, even though we know they don't see black and blue, okay? They only see red and green. Black and blue is known to be effective because so many people throw it. It's like red crankbaits, right, in spring. If everybody's throwing black and blue, somebody's catching fish, then suddenly it's black and blue is the most effective, okay? Fair enough. Black and blue catches a lot of fish. You're pitching, you're flipping, done. Green pumpkin, black and blue, watermelon candy, okay? But change it up a little bit. How about that? Go with a black and blue crankbait, okay? Give that a shot, all right? So just think about that. When people talk about colors that are working, use that color, but change the presentation. All right, so that's the next installment. This is the next installment, last installment for this section of the river. We will do the Maryland side, which will be from Marshall Hall all the way down to Nanjaboy, which will include Mattawoman, probably the most pressured creek in the Potomac River. We will cover that in the next installment of the Tidal River Breakdown series. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this with anyone you think would be interested in getting on fish in the Potomac. Please like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow JL Scott Fishing and Eats on Facebook. Find me on TikTok, Instagram, and of course here on YouTube. And don't forget to comment in the section, who was the artist who was planning on buying the Scott Island in the Potomac River. Put that in there, and we'll put everyone who gets it right. We'll do a little giveaway out of those names and send you out something that I think you'll really, really enjoy, especially if you're fishing